everybody. How's everybody doing? It is truly an honor to be back with all of you, and I could not echo the media guys' remarks. This has been truly remarkable. You guys have so much energy, and you have brought it all here today, so thank you so much for making this week so incredible, really. We have on stage some of the brightest stars of the Jewish people who spend their days working, but really every second is dedication to the Jewish people. And we have some questions that we're going to ask them and really try to engage in a more of a relaxed way some of the ideas that we've been talking about today. Let me begin with Ralph. We speak a lot about this idea of mentorship. Young people today and their desire to grow. Talk to us a little bit about what mentorship means to you, maybe either how as you started your career and people you look up to, or now as your career is continuing to grow and the people that you're mentoring.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I even get started, I just want to acknowledge Mr. Eli Horn and Aaron Wolfson for doing this amazing summit. And I'm humbled to be up here. And after such an amazing speech we just heard, that was a true Kiddush Hashem. I'll try to do my best. So, talking about mentorship for me is really pretty easy because as a very young child interested in business, I grew up as the youngest of 5 children. My dad was a Holocaust survivor. My mother came from England, so I had no grandparents, but lived with a total dedication to the elders. That's what we spoke about at home. So very early on, I would always look and ask advice from older people. One piece of advice I can say is, later on as I got older, I realized that the best advice was my mom and my dad, but that took a while to figure out, so we'll all get there. But my mom was my mentor. My dad was a tremendous Talmid Chacham mentor, but throughout my whole life, I've always looked and asked people. And it's really interesting because in business, I give tremendous gratitude to Hashem for the ability that He's given me, and I thank Him every day. But I've also met some of the most amazing people that have mentored me, from Jew to not Jew. 10 years ago, I had the honor of meeting Charlie Munger. And I said, Charlie, give me some advice. And he said, I'm going to give you very short advice. Take the high road, it's less crowded. And many, many people throughout my career have given me advice. Starting out my career, I met a banker. And I said to him, give me some advice. He said, I'm going to tell you something you're not going to realize for 30 years what I told you. And it was 100% good advice. And when 30 years came, I actually called him. And I said, you remember 30 years ago you gave me this advice? He said, well, I've told this to everyone, and I thanked him for it. So I think mentorship is not just people that are professionals, that are older than you. Mentorship is also your peers. I have many people that are mentors of mine that are younger than me, but have experienced. Sol and I have a very special relationship. His ability to navigate through government affairs and other things is just masterful. And I've reached out to him and asked him for advice, and he's reached out to me to ask for advice. And let me just say something, and this is a little bit controversial. Just because you ask advice doesn't mean you always have to listen to that advice. But it is a gathering of information that really makes you a better person in thinking through those things. So just to recap, I will just say, and I know that we're on a time schedule, but being here in this room with so many young, ambitious students, mentors, and people that are looking. So I hosted this Shabbos 6 students that I've met through my career. One of them I actually met over here. And I said, I'm going to be at Olami, and give me some ideas. And he said to me, I was at an Olami conference 5 years ago, and it changed my life. And he said, I was with my colleagues and my peers, and it took someone like myself, but it was the encouragement of my friends that got me to start wearing my kippah and starting to keep Shabbos. So I'm here just to share with you some of the experiences that I've had. I hope that answers some of that
Absolutely.
question.
Thank you. Saul, I turn to you now.
Well, is it working?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, so I'll expand a little bit on what Ralph said. And again, it's a pleasure. First of all, I echo what Ralph said, and kudos to Mr. Ellie Horn and Aaron Wolfson, the whole Wolfson family. It's an unbelievable thing. I come back from here inspired. I go a lot lately. Ralph and I have been on the speaking circuit. We've been going a lot to talk. But talk about mentorship, and he just said something that reminded me something that just happened to me. But yeah, listen, we didn't have grandparents. We weren't fortunate enough. Our grandparents perished in the Holocaust. And to be honest with you, we were mentored a lot. Our parents, at least my father, came as a pretty broken person, liberated from the concentration camps, together with Rabbi Lau. Everybody knows famous Rabbi Lau from Buchenwald. And so I had a lot of mentors, and I think the responsibility, my mentorship, were from people like Rabbi Moshe Sher, people who really, their mission was to rebuild from the ashes. Their mission was to really rebuild. And that really put the impetus in me that whatever I do in my life, I always say, why did God put me in this position? And I'm here to influence others, to mentor others, to make a Kiddush Hashem. And he talked about the kippah, Ralph. I'll tell you a crazy story that happened to me literally just a few weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago. I was at the NBA All-Star Game. So we do the NBA stuff, and what we have around the NBA All-Star Weekend is incredible. We have maybe 80 or 100 people that join us for Shabbos. It happened over a couple of years, but we sent out emails. The commissioner sent out an email to all the Jewish employees at the NBA. And they invite everybody to, these are all traditional families, most of them not Shomer Shabbat, not kosher, and they come and they join us for a Shabbos wherever the All-Star Game is. We host a beautiful Shabbos. We have kids that practice for 6 months to say a Dvar Torah by Uncle Saul's Friday night meal. It became a big, big deal. A young man walks in who I never met before. And he comes over to me with his wife, introduces his wife to me. You got to hear the story. And he says to me, he gets very emotional, and he hugs me, and he takes me around, and literally there are tears coming down his cheeks. And he said, I wanted to call you 2 weeks ago, but I knew that I'm going to see you, and I waited to tell you the story in person. He says, for the last 15 years, he's been working at a huge public accounting firm, at a big public accounting firm. And he says it was predominantly a Jewish firm, but the rule in the firm was no yarmulkes. So it was a Jewish firm, but he couldn't wear his yarmulke, and it really bothered him. He says, 2 months ago, there was a posting for a job at the MBA. At the MBA, there was a job posting for somebody in a high position in an accounting firm. So he goes, he does interview number 1. Of course, he goes to the interview without his yarmulke. And he says he goes to interview 1, interview 2, the final, last interview. He says, now's the time they're ready to make me an offer. Now's the time to tell them I can't work on Shabbat. We have holidays, Chagim. And he starts telling this interviewer, and the interviewer turned red in the face and says, now you're not telling me the truth. You're not religious. He says to her, what do you mean I'm not religious? She says, if you would really be religious, you'd be wearing a kippah like Saul and all his children. How could you be religious? The only religious people I know wear the kippah, eat all the time. He says he was so embarrassed. He reached into his pocket and he pulled out the kippah. And he says, 15 years I worked in a Jewish accounting firm. I couldn't wear my kippah. I'm working at the MBA. He says the most goyish place. They play games on Shabbos. They play games and things. And here, they're not only am I able to wear the yarmulke, they're telling me if you're religious, your sign of religion is that you're wearing proudly a kippah. And he's walking around at the MBA every day. I got a note from the commissioner saying, Saul, thank you for blazing the way that we can have employees at the MBA wearing a yarmulke. So mentoring is not always, taking a kid, and I'll tell you some more stories because Charlie was telling me that he wants to bring up his son to my office. It became a destiny. You know what? I'll take a second spot, Ralph, and then you'll go. Charlie was telling me before that, because we're in sports, the kids, it's very exciting for the kids, and they come up and they see a religious guy, with mezuzahs on the door, and they're getting a kosher sandwich, and we're walking around with the yarmulke, and we have prayers in the office. So it's very inspiring for these young kids. So Charlie said, is it okay? He spoke to my son. Is it okay if I bring up my son for the bar mitzvah? So I'm going to tell you a story, and I may have said this before. Maybe somebody has heard it, but it's worth hearing it again. So we have such a program. We have a mentoring program in our office where we bring up families because it's so exciting for the kids. We have a program that was started by the legendary Rebbetzin Jungreis. Everybody heard her name. She's the one that started this program in my office. We get families to come up. Totally Jewish families, but really not affiliated. A father, a mother, their kids. We have a few families that come up at a time. I give them a tour of the office. We make them these customized jerseys, their name in the back, very exciting for them. And we sit down and we have a dinner and we tell over different stories. So maybe, I don't know, it's a while ago, some couple comes up as part of the group. It's a husband, a wife, a son, and a daughter. The daughter's about 10 or 11 years old. The boy looked like bar mitzvah age, as Charlie said. And this kid is pestering me with questions. He says, Saul, when you and your family, you go to Super Bowl, you have kosher? I said, yes. You go to World Series? Yes. I told him over the famous hot dog story, right? I told you the hot dog story. So he's asking me, and he's asking me 100 questions about eating kosher wherever I go. Okay, they left. It was very nice. About 2 weeks later, my secretary tells me somebody's on the phone. He's very irate. He's very angry. And he says, he must speak to you. I said, who is he? She comes back to me. She tells me it's the father of that kid that was making you meshuggah, making you crazy by the things. I pick up the phone, and in a very angry voice, his name was Jason. He says, Saul, you know what? You owe me $50,000. I said, I owe you $50,000? What did I do to you? He says, ever since my son came back from your office, he's making my wife and I crazy. He says, I don't understand. Saul goes to the World Series, he eats kosher. He goes to World Cup in Qatar, he eats kosher. He goes wherever he goes, they bring him kosher food. My bar mitzvah is going to be in New York City, and my bar mitzvah is not kosher? Can't be, he says. The son is telling this to the father. I said, wow, what a great thing. It's unbelievable. He says, yeah, but the kosher caterer wants $50,000 more than the regular caterer. And I couldn't figure out if he's joking with me or not. So I said to him, you know what, Jason, what an honor for my family to be able to host a kosher bar mitzvah for your son. I said, I'm giving you my assistant. Give her the wire instructions. Tomorrow you have that $50,000. Wait, that's not the story. The guy breaks down crying on the phone. He breaks down crying on the phone. He says, I'm a wealthy man. The bar mitzvah is in the Pierre Hotel. I was there with my wife. Bar mitzvah cost $1 million. He had every entertainer. He was a very, very wealthy man. He says to me, Saul, this is going to be the first kosher affair in our family in generations, he says, from telling this kid a story. Esther, we went to the bar mitzvah. I'm walking around. The kid is so proud. He's schlepping me over to all his friends. There's Uncle Saul, the guy that made my kosher bar mitzvah. I stay in touch with this kid. The kid is now he's learning Hebrew. He goes to Sunday school from nothing. That's mentoring. Mentoring is showing them that you could be successful. You could do anything in your world. My message to everybody here is as follows. I'm not a rabbi. That's Rabbi Harary. There's Charlie.
There's another rabbi. There's no rabbi.
There's Charlie. If you feel that being religious, keeping Shabbat, eating kosher, doing anything that you do is going to stop you or hold you back from accomplishing anything you want to accomplish in life, you're looking at two guys, Ralph and myself. They're going to tell you absolutely it's baloney. You could do whatever you want. You don't have to compromise anything to accomplish. They play games on Shabbos. We have World Series games on Shabbos. We have everything on Shabbos. We go to crazy places. If you're consistent and you're honest, you could be religious, and by showing it by example, you could influence so many people for generations to come.
Great. Thank you, Sol. All right. So Ralph, let me jump on that a little bit and let me turn to you.
How do I top that?
It's impossible. It's impossible. But we each got to be our own person. That's the key.
That's okay.
You be you.
My son always told me to buy a sports team. I think I'm going to do it now, Sal.
When you come back next year, you'll own a team, and the two of you will have kosher food in the suite.
And we won't play on Shabbos.
Right. So, but one thing that you definitely can share with everybody here, and I want to turn to you for this opinion. You know, Sol mentioned in his incredible way the idea of not compromising, the idea of having beliefs and what the belief does, even in the face of adversity. Your exposure to so many people in the business world, your exposure in the work that you're doing, puts you in circumstances where Shabbat gets in the way, holidays there's so many times where in your career you've had these moments of where your faith and your career have, so to speak, seemed to have come in conflict. Talk to us a little bit about your perspective and your experience about sort of faith in your career.
So I'm going to start by saying, just to echo a little bit what Sal said, that there are challenges, and living in New York makes it a little easier because, you know, religious Jews are pretty dominant and people have met them. But my firm does business across the country, and I have had many opportunities that I could have capitulated and said, you know what, it doesn't work. But I think when people realize, I'm in the finance world, so I deal with bankers, I deal with so many diverse type of people. I think when people really feel that you're sincere about things, they really believe it. I will tell you that I got a call from the number 2 person at Capital one of the big banks, right? Everyone's heard of them. Who knows, what's in your wallet, that famous ad? And it's a Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, and my phone rings, and I say, Rick, is everything okay? Sunday, you usually don't get called from banks. And he says to me, Ralph, I just want to share with you that my summer home by the beach, my neighbor that moved in is an Orthodox Jew. And Friday night, I was sitting on my porch, and I saw him having his Shabbat meal with his candles burning and his family and his wife. And I called my wife. I said, Loretta, come outside. And I said, look at that. Now I know what gives Ralph the energy and the strength a whole week. It's his peace and tranquility that he has on his Sabbath. So I was like blown away. I had a situation where my phone rang 5 minutes before Shabbat, and a banker calls me and says to me, I want to tell you this very large loan was approved. And I said, oh, thank you so much, because I didn't want you to go into your Sabbath being nervous about it. When I called back on Sunday, he says, you should know I didn't have the last signature. I knew I'd get it, but I wanted you to have your peace and tranquility. So I've had many of these situations. You know, many people have heard me say the story to echo, you know, with the yarmulke and faith and everything else. I was invited to a dinner at Mar-a-Lago, and no one knew what Mar-a-Lago was 20 some odd years ago. And it was Christmas time, and my wife and I are driving up, and I never take off my yarmulke. It was just something I've always kept on. And for some reason, we had a discussion, am I going to feel uncomfortable? Am I going to make the people uncomfortable? And somehow I capitulated, and as I'm walking, I take my yarmulke off and I put it in my pocket. And I walk inside, and Ashley, who's hosting me, I was not having dinner, I was just going for dessert, we had just closed a large deal, walks over, he goes, Ralph, where's your kippah? I told all my friends, there's young guys, very successful, who's going to walk in with a kippah. You put it on and you never take it off. And I was like, totally embarrassed, but it was a great lesson. And I truly believe that the whole reason that happened is, so I should always know that never to compromise. But you talk about faith, religion, you talk about other things. Around 3 years ago, I bought a new company, had a major insurance company that was my partner, and had 200 new employees. And every Friday, I send out to the firm an email, just recapping about the week. We started it mainly before COVID, and it became a tradition. And I end the email by saying, and we're a large company, and we have, many Jews, many non-Jews, and I always say, good Shabbos, have a good weekend. And I've been questioned about it, how do you say it, and I've always justified it. For some reason, this weekend that I was now welcoming a bunch of new people into the firm and a new CEO, I felt maybe I should drop the good Shabbos. So we debated it back and forth, we discussed it internally, and I actually called some of my young colleagues. They said, Ralph, that's so not like you. What happened all of a sudden? I said, things change. And I'm like, Sol, you'll admit, we go through these struggles constantly. So finally, I decide after 3 different reiterations of this letter, we're going to drop the good Shabbos. We're just going to say, have a nice weekend. All right. 30 minutes later, the email goes out. And I'm reading the email, and it says, have a good Shabbos, have a good weekend. I call my sister, and I say, Megan, what happened to the email? She goes, what? She goes, oh, you left that out of good Shabbos, so I put it back in. This is a non-Jewish assistant. I want to tell you, I said, Megan, I must tell you, that was not your hand, that was God's hand that was there. And I actually was... I couldn't talk about the story because I was actually embarrassed that I actually went through this thing. But if we're not honest with each other and we don't really admit to each other that we go through these times and periods where we question, are we doing the right thing? Are we being too this or too that? We wouldn't get into a better place. And I think when we go through these experiences and we see Yad Hashem, God's hand, guide us, it really, truly demonstrates to us. And I want to tell you something, I'm not unique. We all have and see God's hand. You have to look for it and see it. It's there. That is another thing that I tell all the time. I just also have the knowledge, we have Rabbi Gershenfeld listening to me, and I must tell you, Rabbi Gershenfeld has made this world a better world. By all his, I host so many of his. And not to embarrass him, but I remember there was one student that was by me for Shabbos. He was getting married. And he said to me, I'm really excited. I'm just having some issues with my parents. I said, really, what are the issues? My mother doesn't want me to wear a white hat. She doesn't want me to, a black hat, doesn't want me to wear a white kittel. So he said, but I discussed it with my rabbi, and he said to me, it's your mother's wedding. It's the same way your wedding. You're not wearing a black hat, and you're not wearing a white kittel. And you're getting married anyway, the same way. So, Rabbi Gershenfeld, you have just demonstrated to the world that a person can grow in his Judaism and not create controversy between family members and parents. And that is something that I see every day, and I just want to thank you publicly for that. So, Moshe, did I get more time than Sol? Did Sol get more time than me? All right.
It's okay.
So
Go ahead, Charlie. I'll just...
But the hour is coming late, and I want to make sure that we're going to make sure we get to the second program. But what I want to, before I ask my last question, I want to just invite the students to really take their time when you see them later on. They love it. That's why they're here. Don't feel embarrassed to come up and ask questions. And students that are out there that are thinking of things that you can access these 2 giants, please do. So let me ask my final question. And these are what they're going through really are struggles that a lot of people go through, which is great. And I'll start with Sol, and then maybe you'll immediately hand over to Ralph as the final question for this session. And please feel free to ask them later on. One of the things that I think is one of our great qualities as the Jewish people is our comfortability in struggle. Spain is a place that tortured us. A softer people would have been dissolved. And what we have going for us amongst the many things that God has given us is the ability to struggle. You mentioned your parents, the Holocaust survivors, a heroic generation that came to America and wasn't scared of struggle. It was part of their life, and they saw it as something of valor. As we grow and as our people continue on to try to bring values to the world, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to balance faith and business. It's a struggle to bring values to a world that feels sometimes valueless. Share with us a little bit some struggles, maybe as you were growing, or maybe even in your current capacity, where you, like Ralph mentioned, you struggled a little bit and ultimately triumphed, but share with us a little bit of that struggle.
Listen, I'm in, as I said before, I'm in a very non-Jewish world. And I realized early on that I have to pick a path. You have to be consistent. You can't be one day this way, one day. I realized a long time ago in my business that the only way this is going to work is there's no separation of home, work. You can't be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You can't be two different people. You have to have consistency. And who you are is who you are. And you have to make sure you're living, because of the fact of the struggles, and people look to, we answer to a higher authority. We are the chosen people. Anybody sitting in this room has to understand who we really are. In Hebrew, it's called Am HaNivchar. We are the chosen people. And people look to us, and everybody says, well, I'm not wearing my yarmulke. They all know you're Jewish. They all know who you are, and you have to act accordingly. And instead of us trying to, and I learned this, my father, the Holocaust survivors, they rebuilt, but they rebuilt in the right way. They rebuilt the same values. I once had a situation, and in a courtroom with a court case in Poland about a shul, and the judge said to me, how could you be so passionate about these issues? So many years later, I said, because we have to connect to the past in order to have a future. And so the values that I learned is stop worrying about what everybody's going to think of you. You have to be consistent. You have to be honest. Ralph was telling a story about Shabbat. I'll tell you a great story, and then I'll hand it back over to Ralph. My first year, and I may have told you this, my first year that I got an NFL license, it was a big deal for me. That was a game changer in my company, getting the NFL, which is like getting the, I don't know what. It's like getting
the NFL.
It's like getting the NFL. So I go to my first Super Bowl. I go to my first Super Bowl. I'll never forget. It was in Arizona. Okay. And they tell me the big event that the NFL hosts for all of their licensees, it's almost like a mandatory event. It's the Shabbos afternoon brunch. Shabbos afternoon brunch. So I Google on the map, and it's about 2 miles from my hotel. 2 miles from my hotel. So I asked Gashal, I went to shul in the morning, and I came back, and I made Kiddush, and I think my wife was there, and I said, you know what, I'm going to, out of respect, it was my first year, I really didn't know, but it's Shabbos, so I go, I'm dressed like a mensch, and I start walking 2 miles to this place where this brunch is. And on the way, I see guys, I said, Sol, you want a lift? I said, it's my Shabbat, I can't get into the car, and I'm walking, and I'm schwitzing, it's pretty hot in Arizona, and I get there, and the first thing I do when I walked in, the bus got out there because maybe 10 people passed me and they saw that I'm walking. And the commissioner comes running over to me, who subsequently became my really, really close friend. And he says to me, Saul, is it true that you really walked 2 miles to come here? I said, yes, it is true. I said, but Roger, that's not the bad part. The bad part is I got to walk 2 miles back. So he says to me, wow, that's really, and he was very impressed, and I forgot about it. The next year, it's 2 months before the Super Bowl. My secretary tells me the commissioner's secretary called and wanted to know which hotel are you staying in for the weekend, because the NFL gives you a list of hotels that you could pick. They give you 2 or 3 hotels. So she says, okay. I said, sure. What do you mean? They're hosting me. The secretary called me back and told me the commissioner said to call you and tell you that from now on, whichever hotel you're staying in for Shabbat, that's where we're going to host the brunch. And for the last 20 years, wherever I stay, they take in advance, they host the brunch. So my message is simple. If you're honest, if you're consistent, if you're real, they see that you really mean it, then you don't have to bend to them. They're going to respect you. They're going to respect you and bend for you. They're going to see that you're really a serious person. You mean it. You're not doing it just out of whatever reason, but you're consistent in the way you act in your business. That's going to make a tremendous impact, and it's going to pave the way for so many others. Now we have so many people that call me and say, Shlomi, Saul, which hotel? We want to stay there too, because we also have to go to the brunch. So the message is very simple. Yes, we have trials and tribulations. In the beginning, it's tough. I had people used to walk in, they have no idea. They never met a guy with a yarmulke. I used to go out to certain colleges and certain campuses. We get college licenses. They had no idea. But stay true, stay the course, and eventually, if you do it the right way, with God's help, everybody's going to come around and see the real value and the beauty of the Jewish religion.
Okay, Ralph. Final words, Ralph. Final words.
So I think that in talking to young students who all have a bright future ahead of you, I think you have tremendous opportunity to show the world all the positive things about the Jewish people. And there's always going to be some negative story that people are going to try to hop on and say, but you need to make a real impression in whatever it is. We go to many conferences, and I tell my people all the time, whether you're Jewish or you're not Jewish, you get in an elevator, make sure you let the people out, the women out first. Just be polite, because whether you're wearing a yarmulke or you're not, whatever it is, we're New Yorkers, so immediately we get tagged the New Yorkers. And there's so many things that you can do to show the positive thing about a person. And ultimately, a banker that I'm very close to for 30 years, recently retired from the bank, and I took him on a trip to Israel. And it was the most unbelievable trip. And we stopped at a place to have some lunch, and there were two soldiers there. And I said, Jim, I want to take a picture with you with the two soldiers. So the two soldiers get up, we take a picture. And then I said, Jim, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to treat these soldiers to lunch. And he was like, wow. So I go to the cashier and I say to them, those two soldiers that just took the picture with me and my friend, I'd like to take care of their lunch. And I saw the guy was a little bit, uncomfortable. So I said, is there any issue? He says, yeah, you see that other couple? They paid for lunch already for them. So I think he was trying to decide if he should charge twice or not. That was his dilemma. My friend Jim O'Donovan, he just turned 80 years old, and he was blown away. He said, I've never seen, his dad was a fireman, his uncles were a policeman. Last week, he sends me a text, and this was not on my intentions to say it, but I'm going to read it because I want to show you the message that everyone can really demonstrate what we can do. And he writes me a text last week, and he says to me as follows. And he says, big day today. This was 25th, when Israel celebrated 75 years. 75 years for Israel. Although I was only 6, living in Brighton Beach, I can vaguely remember a lot of happy people. And all my friends telling me what happened, seeing what has happened over those years on our recent trip shows the resiliency and the fortitude of the people of Israel. Jim. So here is a situation where an Irish Catholic, very close friend of mine, I made an emphasis of taking him to Israel and showing him everything about the Jewish people. And we can all do it at work. You don't realize how a colleague of yours at work is suffering from something. You can literally put a good word. I will tell you that talk about struggles and a dilemma. Somehow, I think I got the worst driver in Spain yesterday. He never was in Madrid. It was supposed to take 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And I got frustrated. I said, they're sending me a driver. I knew they weren't being cheap. And then he sends me a text. I see you're upset. Would you like another driver? And I said to Moshe, I said, I do not want to make a Chillul Hashem. And I will not have another driver. I said, don't worry. Just figure out your ways. I know it's your first time. He dropped us off over here. It also took an extra 30 minutes. And I gave him a tip. He goes, why are you tipping me? I didn't do such a good job. I said, you did a great job. And he was talking about it in the car. He heard us talking about, Spain and what was going on and about the Jewish people. And he's 20. He said he was 20 years old. He's a student. He heard me talking numbers on the phone, and he was saying, maybe I shouldn't go to law school. Maybe I should come, to New York. But the truth of the matter is, it was very easy for me to just say, you know what, get me another driver because you got to always look. I said, here he sees hundreds of Jewish people coming together. He is hopefully going to remember that we did the right thing. So, and it's a challenge, trust me. It's not my personality to be so easygoing on a driver. But at the end of the day, we always have to find those places. And again, I can't thank everyone enough. I just want to say one thing. I'm a busy person, but there are many students that have come over to me here that have recognized me, been to my office, been to my house. Please feel free to reach out, because I want to say one thing. As much as you think I'm doing for you, you're doing for me. My family has become a better family from hosting students, by hosting people that have grown. So many of you have made the choices that are the hardest things in the world. And I'll just end by saying this. God has put me in a place. He's put everyone in a place. No matter where you are in your career, you can make a difference. So as one large Jewish family, let's really make the world a better place. Thank you so much.
Okay. So as we conclude, I want to first begin by thanking the both of you for being here and inviting the students to spend time with them. Maybe if I can just sort of tie both the minister's speech and what you've heard a minute ago. The minister ended with an incredible charge. She said that inside every one of you is a diamond, and etched in that diamond is the word eternity. And if we actually believe that inside each and every one of us is an incredibly powerful soul, and you take the words that you're hearing in front of you right here today, consistency, being proud, being you, and bringing that pride to the world, there's no telling who you can be and what you can do. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you both for sharing.